I am here in Bellingham, Washington, and I'm here to visit Pam Bosch, who is the owner, founder, and designer of the Highland Hemp House. She's very kindly let me stay here for many days, and I'm loving it. My first visit, spending the night in a hemp home. So Pam, when did you first become interested in industrial hemp? I mean, what led you in this direction?
All right, well, hello, Lillian, and welcome to the Highland Hemp House. I first started thinking about hemp building when I was looking for non-toxic insulation to renovate my 1969 mid-century modern home that was in need of some caretaking. And I discovered that the fiber bat insulation was not available on the market at that time. So as I kept researching, the word Hempcrete came up, and I delved into that, and I haven't looked back since then.
Well, you've done a beautiful job. I've certainly enjoyed spending during these blistery days, these last few days here in your home. And as I mentioned this morning, with all the wind and the rain outside, I have felt so safe and comfortable, and it's just lovely to touch.
It does have a visceral quality that is hard to describe without actually being in the room.
Well, you've been very generous in letting me stay so long, too. Can you elaborate on your multi-dimensional vision when you started designing and researching on your home? And do you want to walk around and show us as we...
Sure. Well, I could back up a little bit and say that my interest in hemp in general probably has deep roots in my upbringing, where my father was very much opposed to chemical farming and worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But more, he was from generations of farmers, as many Americans were, and the use of chemicals to kill insects and fertilizers to make plants grow was not a natural system. And so, I mean, he could see this in the 50s, and what we know today, how do we back ourselves out of this problem? And the same thing is true of our building industry. We've adapted many materials and methods for expediency and economic reasons that aren't necessarily consistent with our quality of life or our well-being. So that's where we are today in many of our systems.
Well, when you began your research, which was back in what, 2015, 2014?
14.
Yeah, so did you just go online and start Googling, healthy materials for construction? Because at that time you owned the house and you were living in it.
Yes.
And so what is it that you saw that led you towards Hempcrete?
So as I say, I was looking for insulation, and I thought the Canadians were growing hemp for seed for 20 years. And I knew that in the UK, I found this bat insulation made out of the hemp fibers. And so I thought maybe I could get some of that. But as I kept Googling, Steve Allen's name came up. And so he had a book written at that time, and I emailed him from an address, and I learned that he was doing a workshop in Colorado.
Oh, so you flew down to Colorado to attend the workshop. Was it for the cast in place, and then what was the workshop? Was it building a tiny home?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And at that time, that was essentially the method that had been pioneered by Steve and a few other people, was to build forms, take the stalk of the hemp plant, mix it with lime, and pack it into those forms around a structure, usually a stick frame, but meaning 2x4 studs, or a timber frame, which is where the hemp would be just kind of infill. And to demonstrate that, there were Americans that wanted to learn how to do this. So John Patterson was on board, and a few other people. We had a workshop of about 15 or 20 people, and I thought, this is great.
It's nice to do the hands-on, because that's what I did too.
Yeah, and it's natural materials. It makes so much sense.
It's so simple.
And an educational process started where you learn all the good properties, that it allows the moisture to pass through, that using lime instead of cement takes a lot less energy, and you're not mining aggregate like in concrete. You have gravel and stone, and just everything, the way that hemp connects to fibers, connects to clean agriculture, connects to using less water, connects to protein that's good for animal food, and it's good for human food. It's more digestible than soybeans. And so, you know, when you realize that one plant can do all of these things,
it's amazing.
Yeah. Why aren't we taking advantage of this?
Why do you think, though, this is what I've been asked when I tell people what I'm doing, is why did they ever stop growing it and using it here in the U.S.?
That's a good question. And
it
has multiple answers. Obviously, we have a lot of top-down structures, and so decisions are made according to, for economic reasons. And so whoever has the control to influence how money is made, I mean, if they have a self-interest in that, then they're going to make the rules to feed their own coffers. And we all know the world we live in today, that's a huge problem. As the COP26 is concluding in Scotland, and we're hearing those messages, it's actually destroying us. So hemp is kind of a poster child of what happens when narrow self-interest decides, in this case, what crops can be grown.
So how do you think that hemp can not only benefit our health through the consumption of the hemp parts, through building with healthy material of hemp and lime, and I know that growing it mitigates a lot of the toxins or the metals that are in the soil, so it repopulates the good bacteria, and also sequesters a lot of carbon into the ground. On the economic end, what do you think? How do we ignite with people who don't know that there is the industrial hemp, and they only associate it with, marijuana and smoking? How do you think we can ignite and get them to direct it in a more economic, beneficial?
Well, I think, first of all, it starts with education. As you say, hemp is not marijuana, but I don't think that, I think it's more complex than that. Hemp, the potentials, as it grows, it cleans the soil because it's very fast growing. And so big, tall, fast growing plants suck the nutrients, and it's able to suck heavy metals along with it. This is my understanding. I'm not an agronomist, but these stories have come out over and over again that it can clean the soil. But in telling that story, I think one of the big obstacles is that, why is our soil so dirty? Why is it being depleted? Well, maybe, how did those heavy metals get in the soil?
In the first place, yeah.
And not only the heavy metals, but, when you have fertilizers that are a balance of basically 3 ingredients, where are all the other things that are produced by microorganisms and healthy soil? What's the difference between healthy living soil and soil that has added nutrients to make the plants grow? And so it's a bigger story that when you confront the whole story, you are kind of stepping on the toes of people who are heavily invested in agribusiness and the whole economic system. So first of all, we have to value telling the truth about how we come out of this. And then another thing is really look at our system that continues to make hemp prohibitive to grow. So we're still treating it like it's the problem, it's a drug. And we're making farmers prove that they're not criminals.
Right.
So they have to test their fields, and they have to pay huge, they have to pay fees to grow hemp that aren't present if you're growing corn or wheat. Or so it's a wicked problem. It has, we're living with the consequences of a bunch of decisions that have been made for economic benefit of the few. And we can say that about
like
climate change,
oil
we can
and
say
gas.
that about inequity, we can say that about really the problems that we're facing today, which is why hemp is such a poster child for change, because it takes that wicked problem and go, here's a plant that deals with water shortages, that deals with cleaning up the soil, that deals with a better building material. So this house, even though I had to import my hemp, and I haven't calculated my actual carbon footprint, but as a potential, if I could have bought hemp that was grown nearby, I have 40 solar panels on the roof.
So you are totally off grid in a way. I mean, you provide your own energy completely.
Yes, I'm not off grid. I'm connected to the
You're connected
power grid.
to the grid.
But long-term goals are that we have microgrid. We have homes that do have a south orientation, so we can put solar panels on the roof, and we can generate all the energy, have efficient systems, Hempcrete walls that hold the heat and also insulate from the cold, that moderate the humidity so that you can have a tight envelope without having a buildup of moisture inside. The very old building materials really solve a lot of the problems of building with plastics and materials that incorporate formaldehyde and volatile organic compounds and so on. With one very simple
Plant
building material, you can solve a number of problems. That's what gives us hope. We can change when we can see the possibilities.
And it's very sad that people, or maybe they are now, connecting their health problems, many of them, from their toxic environmental living spaces.
Oh,
Do you know? And I've heard this mentioned over and over again, that people, when they realize they're living in a plastic home and not a healthy breathing home, that maybe it's a wake-up call. Maybe it's and it's, so petroleum oriented. In so many ways, especially right now.
Well, I think we should be beyond woke,
Yeah.
I walk outside and obviously we're breathing fumes from cars. Yeah, and most homes, natural gas is supposed to be efficient, but it's toxic. We have vinyl and Tyvek and, all kinds of things that are used to make buildings cheap. And why highly processed materials are cheaper than minimally processed materials, we should be asking ourselves that. But of course, look at all the lawsuits for, Monsanto, for corporations that make things that they can sell without regard for what are the long-term effects, where are the toxins, where are the poisons going.
Well, show us your beautiful home, and we can talk further about the details of your creating and designing your healthy home that, you know, it has brought you great pleasure, and a lot of other people who have seen your videos and seen your writings and your articles. So where do you want to start?
Well, I think the point of my home is not that it's my home. I'd like to show that I'm not a builder. I'm not an architect. You know, I do have some aesthetic training.
You're an artist.
Yeah.
So you have the artistic eye.
Right. And it was also my home. I live in the space. I know how I want to move in the space and what I want to live with. And so, yeah,
I love the colors. That's what I said when I first arrived. How beautiful and warm, and just to touch the walls. Some of them feel like sort of a satin or a suede.
And that is something that I want to demonstrate. That plaster, lime as a building material, is wonderful. In a sense, it's a reconstituted stone. It's reconstituted limestone. So I mentioned earlier that I had once lived in a sandstone building, and it had a certain feel. Stone is, I don't know, a secure, solid kind of feel, and lime is like the shell is made from decomposed shells of oysters and clams and, you know, bones, the interior structure or the exterior structure. So it makes sense that these materials have a kind of a feeling of security.
Living in a clamshell, you said the other day.
Yeah.
I love it. So you took the house down. When was this house originally built?
There are parts of this house that were turn of the century.
Okay. And you took it down to the studs, basically, and redesigned the layout?
Yeah, so this part of the house is the old house. And I definitely wanted to preserve it because it had good design. And I based the rest of the house off of what was started here. And the house was built by a man who was partners in a boat building business. And so we have ship ribs in the ceiling, and we have sort of clear story that are reminiscent of portholes, and we have a spiral staircase upstairs and a rounded deck that's kind of like the deck of a ship. And its location is near the water. So, you know, I had a head start on the design. Look, we didn't even straighten up the shades. Oh, well.
Hey, it's a home. And then, yeah, you have this incredible porch or deck with a view when it is clear. Looking over at, which island again is that, Lummi?
Lummi Island.
Lummi Island.
And then beyond that, Orcas and the rest of the San Juans.
And as I look out here, you have these two structures. And this one was when Steve Allen came
to
conduct a workshop.
After I went to the workshop in Colorado, I asked Steve Allen if we couldn't do another workshop on my property, and we kept in communication. And as I kept researching, I kept saying, I've got to do this. You know, everything said yes, rather than
the
no.
universe was directing you.
Yeah.
And then you built this. That is going to be your garden Your greenhouse, rather?
Well, I intended to have 2 workshops. I was going to build 2 tiny houses, and the second workshop didn't work out. My materials, my hemp source was, the hemp was defective, so I put it off, and later decided to turn that foundation into a greenhouse so that the whole site models a kind of a permaculture site where potentially I can grow food, enough food. I can use the deck for food. The deck kind of brings the inside out, the outside in, so it's a connection with the outside.
Well, the problem you had with regard in relationship to the hemp, that's even another strong reason we need to provide a source for the farmers who grow it. You know, that they can sell it to people like yourself and myself and others to be able to build with it and construct. You know, it's developing the chain. Right. The infrastructure, right, that you and I have been talking about.
Yes.
It's essential.
Right. And it's a complex problem, though. I mean, I think we have to be honest and clear about what the prohibitions are. You know, like, it's not the farmer's fault that he doesn't have a market.
Right.
It's and a stage. What in order to get between the farmer and the building material, you have to have a processor that separates the fiber. A decorticator. Yes, and so decorticators are available in Europe because they are growing it for fiber, and they have markets for the fiber as well. So these are dual markets. Here, what's really caught on is CBDs because it's a high value end product. But what about, what about the rest of the plant? Yeah, if people who've been using CBD all this time realize that there's other values to the hemp plant, that are healthy. There's, I mean, it just goes on and on. The more research I have done in finding out, just like you said earlier, it's fire resistant, mold resistant, and termites hate it, apparently, from the reading I've done, and all sorts of other insects. So it's just the breathability, the feeling, the touching. I mean, when they realize that this is the cousin, or, well, it's the plant hemp, which is CBD, maybe that is helpful for the market. I mean, those individuals. Again, but I don't think that the people who are looking to buy CBDs are responsible for developing the building industry. I understand, but they certainly can pressure the various elected officials locally and nationally. Well, in terms of economics, I mean, the first CBD product that I had was in the Netherlands from Albert Dunn, had a freeze-dried product from the flowers of a fiber variety. Oh, okay. Now we've gotten into this CBD and that CBD. And that one's hot, you can't use this one. And well, that was true in Europe as well. We've found the incentive to develop different strains of CBD and ways of extracting CBD. But the whole housing market hasn't taken off for different reasons. So that is, we think about who builds a house, from the designer to the guy who nails the studs. Engineer and... Yeah, there are many different elements there, and we have a status quo of a way of doing things that is resistant to disruption. So again... Good statement. This connects to a larger problem. Ending COP26. Very hard for wealthy countries to change the way they do things. Divesting from oil. Because, but look how this connects. I mean, every construction project around has a building wrap made out of plastic. The cheapest one is Tyvek, Dow Chemical. the same people that, you know, are causing, you know, all kinds of chemical pollution, but they have tremendous power. So all these problems are interconnected, and they're very sensitive, and they're very hard for the people who have the power to talk about and to adjust and change. Exactly the problem at COP21 is a problem relating to the building industry's ability to change or not change.
Yeah. We talked earlier about cement.
Yeah.
And how energy intensive it is to produce, and how negative. I mean, some of the base of some of the various hemp homes have some cement at the base and on the ground part, but not in the envelope, you know, of the house, which is it's not helpful to the direction that a lot of us would like to see our building industry go. You know, it's going to change.
Yeah. I mean, the people in the Post-Carbon Institute and Architecture 2030 and so on are very focused for the whole building industry on getting the carbon emissions and the inefficiency of cement making solutions to that. Because at one time, I don't know, viewers will have to check my facts, but buildings are responsible for, they thought, about 7% of total carbon emissions around the world.
The elements that are used in constructing buildings.
Well, when you make cement,
right,
you fire it to a very high temperature, and so that dumps a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Some of the things that are added to the cement are likewise energy intensive, and then the sheer volume of concrete that's used around the world to build with. So one of the things that, so this building industry is looking at alternatives. And a lot of people would ask me, can you use Hempcrete instead of concrete for foundations and for buildings? And the answer is no, it's not. It's not equitable. It's, this is above ground material. It's not structural. It's not, well, you know, last night the wind was blowing, probably 50 miles an hour, and the house is not swaying. I mean, the old wooden house, even though it was well built, you could feel some movement in the house.
But you have rebarb.
I have some structural reinforcement, but even so, it's almost common sense that as you have this material hardening around your studs, instead of fiberglass bad insulation surrounding your studs, and then some sheeting material on the outside, this is much more supportive. But the point is that where concrete is used in foundations and skyscrapers and, you know, places like that, you have to have a structural, compact, something that will support weight on top of
right.
it. Whereas where cheap cement is used around the world, places like Nepal, where they had an earthquake and buildings fell in on people, Haiti, Mexico City, much of South and Central America, all over the world, cement is used as a building material because it's cheap. And so it might not be high quality cement, but it still is fired and so on. Whereas above ground, the binder in Hempcrete is lime. And so when you make lime, you take that same limestone and you fire it to about 900 degrees Celsius. And it retains some of its porosity. When you use that limestone in cement, you're firing it to 1250 degrees. And then you're adding other minerals that are ground up, basically ground glass and clay and so on. so that it has this hydraulic sets and it holds back water and it has high compaction and so on. You don't need that over your head, you know, where cement roofs fell on people's heads and killed them. You don't need them in above ground walls.
Right, you can use hempcrete.
You can use the same lime fired at a temperature that requires 80% less energy.
Right.
And use a bioaggregate instead of stone and gravel, and you have a better wall system.
Plus, it has, if you want it to take down a wall made of hempcrete, it can be, has another life. It can be broken down and taken back to the earth, whereas cement, so much of it goes right into our landfills.
Yeah.
It's so bad. It just fills up with the landfills.
Well, it's harder. It's a lot harder to get rid of.
Yeah.
And lime that hasn't been fired so high does have other uses. We can make roads out of it. You can, you know, you would still have to crush it, but it's not toxic.
Right. Well, show us over here, because I was so very much love what you have done on the outside with the wall. Rounding. I love the round corners and the big windows. Yeah, this is and the stairway. That's so beautiful. Again, the feeling. Actually, you can feel like you're in one of the Atlantic cruise ships. You know, the old ones. Do you know when they walk down the stairway and to the ballroom? It's so pretty. And the way that you have designed to have the. Tell us about the wood and the design that you used here and what inspired it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the curve is kind of taking off on the nautical feel, but the oak is came from the flooring is oak. It's red oak. Comes from nearby, and it has a finish on it. It has a natural finish on it that it doesn't have VOCs, volatile organic compounds, coming off. So one thing led to another. So oak was, you know, the material that I used. And then with the curved design, though, it presented a problem with getting a banister. Building a curved banister, I found actually a boat builder to complete the design, and that has yet to materialize, but
it will.
I have my fingers crossed that it's going to be soon.
I'm sure it will.
But it will be made out of oak, like the floor, and it'll have strips of oak, and my stone finial.
Well, I just love these walls, the corners.
So these walls are traditional plaster. They're made but with lime, just lime and sand, of grated sand. So there's some fines, and then there's a little bit coarser. And then I added the pigment directly to the plaster. In other places, the finishes have some hemp.
Like in the room I'm staying, it has, it's lovely.
Over here has some hemp added to the plaster, and all of this was an experiment because I didn't have any experience with it, and they're not common building materials. Plaster, lath and plaster is thought to be a thing of the past.
Well, not here in America, yes. In Europe, you probably saw when you had various trips over there, and in various workshops, and you met some real pioneers.
I think it has more to do with the age of the building, because, I mean, I grew up in an old farmhouse that had lath and plaster walls, but that was before we had drywall.
Yeah, I did too. Our farmhouse did.
Yeah, so it's an age factor. And then some of the other finishes I did have some drywall, interior walls, and I wanted it to look like the plaster, so there is a kind of a cementatious wall finish that looks like plaster, but it is more like cement. And I did a lot of experimenting. Not all of my experiments worked out well. I have some area of wall that...
But you're having fun. And your kitchen. So you research quite a bit on what type of stove to buy and the top part of your counter.
Yeah, well, I chose stone rather than real stone rather than a engineered stone. But I mean, I think that's a personal choice.
That's a personal choice, yeah.
This stone I remember I was in Spain in a deli and I saw a giant slab of marble in a mirror image, and it was maybe 14 feet tall by 8 feet wide, and it was so impressive. But the awareness that it had probably been there for about almost 1,000 years, and that this space had been occupied continuously for all of that time. Stone, once we've, quarried it and mined it, it's not the most, we're ripping up the earth, but we should respect the materials that we do that to. And the idea is that this is very recyclable, regardless of what happens. Mm-hmm. I hope.
And the house too, if you wanted to change a wall, you could easily do that with the Hempcrete. Let's see, what else, what other words of experience and wisdom would you like to share with my friends?
I don't know about wisdom, but I would like to, if I could. My reason for building this house was to try and just demonstrate that it was possible, first of all, but to inspire other people to do it. Because being not a builder, not having any particular expertise, the materials are not a limitation. So architects can easily learn how to design hempcrete buildings. I want to dispel the myth that it's more expensive, that it's labor intensive, and therefore it's not expensive labor. Someone who pounds hempcrete into a form is not an $80 an hour carpenter. Depending on which region that you're in. But even more so now, there's technology. When I was in Europe, I saw in 2015, there was, in Germany, there was a spray machine that they were just developing and experimenting with, and they had a few glitches, very small scale. In France, there was a machine that was used to spray he said there were 69 machines in operation, spraying about 1,000 houses a year.
That's
in
wonderful.
2015. And they were spraying over the cobblestone homes, making them comfortable. And then in Italy, in a later conference, one of Steve Allen's symposiums, there was a spray machine demonstrating a 5-story apartment building. So at that time, there were options available. Now we have one developed in Scandinavia. We have spray machines showing up on the market. Mm-hmm. So if there were more demand, it's a simple technology. So technology is not holding us back. Architecture is not holding us back. What is holding us back?
What is?
The status quo, the willingness to change, the recognition that we need to change. We're not really grasping the urgency behind the urgency of changing.
Right now, it's the timing right now is so essential.
And I think the house also demonstrates, you don't have to live in a shack to build ecologically sound homes. This is way more house than I need.
It's how many square feet more or less of living space?
It's 3,400 square feet. It's, easily enough for 2 families. The original house was smaller and it was extended family living here. So, but the point is that this doesn't have to be a boutique house, and it doesn't have to be an outback house. Hempcrete can be used for any size, shape, design.
That's what I've noticed. I love what you've done here. As I said in the very beginning when I arrived, there's an old world feeling about the design and the layout and just this little touches that you thought about. Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, you could do it in a very retro design as well. You can do anything with it. And that's what's so exciting when I took my workshops with hemp. People in the workshops were having great fun.
And Steve Allen's coming out with a new book. I haven't seen it yet. Highland Hemp House is going to be in there.
Oh, congratulations. You didn't tell me earlier.
But I believe that he'll have houses of all sizes and configurations and showing a range of modest to elaborate to, I'm aware of eco-villages being designed with hempcrete.
Where do you think that, well, I heard of something in Texas taking place, and I heard of another one. It's not in Colorado, maybe, but...
Well, I think the one that I'm aware of is in the Netherlands.
Oh, yes, I read about that one, too. It's very exciting.
Yeah, the materials themselves don't really have the limitations that we're led to believe are problems, because it's just a matter of education, but it's not technically difficult.
No. All right. Your heating and cooling system. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Yes.
So there's a movement to go to heat exchangers, outside heat exchangers, rather than combustion furnaces or even electric baseboard, because they're very inefficient. Mini split is what we often call them, where this is a system that's actually a little bit more efficient than that, in that it uses hot water. It uses the heat exchanger outside, but it gives me a domestic hot water and heat, and it's also a reversible system. In this climate and with my home design, I really don't need air conditioning. I have good natural ventilation, and in the Northwest, in the past, we're not that hot. Although last summer was above 90-degree days were quite unusual in June. So this system does have the capacity for both heating and cooling, but it is, and again, my numbers, I think about 30% more efficient than the efficient mini-split systems, because it operates by heating water to a low temperature.
And you keep, like right now, it's so comfortable, and you keep it at a certain temperature?
I think I have them set at 65. But,
65.
But it's radiant heat. It's very comfortable. I mean, I'm uncomfortable with a sweater on at that temperature. It might be a little warmer than that.
All right, on water. I see you have a number, when we were walking outside before it started pouring a couple days ago, that you have some rain barrels, or I don't even know if you could say they're rain barrels, but what are those containers, those big ones underneath your deck?
They're 275-gallon, you might call them totes. Okay. And I have 3 of them interconnected, just because I have a lot of deck space, and so I could put the totes under the deck, and it's not a water reclamation system for drinking water or even toilets. It's just landscape water.
Landscape water. And why not for the toilets? Man, do you do any of the gray water system at all?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Where do you stop?
It's... all right, what about your electricity for your lights and running the various
The house is all electric. There's no combustion. Induction range. And the Chiltrix heating system. And I have 40 photovoltaic solar panels. So I got a rebate check of $3,000 from my excess power.
Lovely.
So I can run a car. I don't have an electric car yet. That's my goal. So the house generates all the power that it needs to run, and probably can run the house and the car. And that's one of the things that I would like to see happen in the housing industry, is if designers paid more attention to orientation, so that they have, like, there's lots of houses getting accolades for being very green because they have a whole bunch of foam in the walls and so on, and they're efficient, they're energy efficient, but the design didn't take into account where the solar panels might go. Where, you know, sometimes the roof faces north instead of south, and that's one easy fix, that, well, relatively easy fix.
I wish, yes, it sounds like all that the research you did and the traveling and the meeting people who've been doing this for decades, being, you know, in the industrial hemp world, that it has paid off enormously, and it's going to continue to pay off in the sense of your wonderful home and creating it. And it shows to other people that it can be done. You were a woman on a mission, and you accomplished it. You're still accomplishing it. And
I wouldn't say I've accomplished it until there, you know, like, maybe if all the new building projects
yeah.
had some of the same considerations, then I would feel mission accomplished. Yeah. But we're not there yet.
Well, we all just have, each one of us does just a few things in changing our habits. When we're thinking about our children, and, you know, you have grandchildren, so you have those in mind, but also about the next generation, and just about nature in general. It's so generous with all its beauty and free gifts that, you know, she gives us every day, and just to be grateful, you know, and appreciate it. But this is great. Pam?
Well, I think, wait a minute, I think that I want to say something. If we're going to, you know, save the world, not just for our grandchildren, but for the children in the global south, happening right now, then those of us who have the ability to make changes, to adapt, why wouldn't we do that? And if nature is our teacher, then we can recognize that all of these things are interconnected, and we can choose to think in terms of systems that are interconnected and regenerative, especially those of us who have the privilege to make these decisions. And the changes in our behavior have a lot of downstream consequences. But also, we do have to make sacrifices in how we live. We should live more conservatively. But they're not sacrifices that make us unhappy. I would say that they're changes that actually contribute to our quality of life, because when we contribute to the well-being of others, we have a more fulfilled life ourselves. And I hope that this house demonstrates that it's certainly not impossible. It's not all that difficult.
No, it's not. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.